Hey everyone, how are you today? I think that this thing is going. There we are. Welcome, and I'm live today, and would love to interact with you. If you have questions or comments, go ahead and write those, type them out, and I'll hopefully be able to respond in some way or another. Yeah, I'd kind of had a bit of a revelation in my reading today, and wanted to share that with you and invite you into some of the thoughts and things that I'm engaging right now. And that begins in Joshua 7 today, right in the middle of Joshua 7, as the Israelites have just won a significant battle, and there is a message that comes from God to Joshua to send to the Israelites about what's going on. And one of the things that God had requested was for the people not to take some things out of their victory, to leave those. And I guess they were probably like idols or expensive things, or just different things that they might find after the victory of the battle, and maybe be tempted to keep for themselves. And God says, don't. And what happens is, of course, as we often fail when we listen to God, or we choose the idol instead of God, right? This goes all the way back to Genesis 3. God confronts them about it. And here's what he says to Joshua about this. He says, this is Joshua 7:10. They have stolen some of the things that I commanded must be set apart for me. And they have not only stolen them, but have lied about it and hidden the things among their own belongings. That is why the Israelites are running from their enemies in defeat. For now Israel itself has been set apart for destruction. I will not remain with you any longer unless you destroy the things among you that were set apart for destruction. Then a couple lines down further here in 13, God says, you will never defeat your enemies until you remove these things from among you. So he's emphasizing that point again. And I think this is pretty critical for us. This is pretty important information about what do we do with the things that God has asked us to destroy. I struggle with this, things that we carry inside of ourselves, ways of living, ways of thinking, ways of operating, behaving, things that we've already heard from or seen from God that he's asked us to address, either through sacrifice and a letting go of those things, or a reframing, a restructuring of a set of beliefs. And yet always the human temptation is to return, to go back to the old way of doing things. And what God is saying so clearly here is that you won't defeat your enemies until you remove those things that are within you, that are among you. And I like how in Matthew 7, I think anyway, that Jesus deals with this as well. So again, we see this interplay between New Testament and the things that Jesus teaches, and the stories of old. We see Jesus at the beginning of chapter 7. He's still in the Sermon on the Mount here, and he says, why worry about a speck in your friend's eye when you have a log in your own? How can you think of saying to your friend, let me help you get rid of that speck in your eye, when you can't see past the log in your own eye, right? So what do we think that we can do to help others address their issues and their struggles that they're having when we continue to return to our own old ways of thinking, right? He says even a little further down in this, in verse 6 of chapter 7, don't throw your pearls to pigs. They will trample the pearls, then turn and attack you, right? So this can sometimes be interpreted as, the throwing your pearls to pigs is don't give of yourself to people who don't appreciate it. But I think it's equally true for self-examination. You know, um, the attack will be upon ourselves. We should expect the attack if we're not engaged in the battle that God has called us into over the things that He's asking us to look at. So he sort of concludes this, at least for me today. Jesus kind of concludes this with talking about fruit in people's lives, and he says in chapter 7, verse 20, yes, just as you can identify a tree by its fruit, so you can identify people by their actions. So, what are our behaviors and our actions showing to the world, showing to God, showing to ourselves about our participation of defeating enemies by not returning, not taking the things God has told us not to? If He asks us for a sacrifice, if He asks us to leave something behind, um, we need to be in collaboration with Him to do just that. Now, we're human beings. Thankfully, God loves us for that in our humanity, and knows that we won't be perfect or do this perfectly on our own. And so the invitation here is to participate with Him in that process of surrendering, of letting go of these things. So I pray for each and every one of you that this will maybe give you a step closer to obtaining the victory against the enemies that you have. Until then, I will see you tomorrow. God bless.